Hold on. Let's hear this.
Hello and welcome back to the Second and Two podcast. I'm your host, TB. I've got my co-host, producer extraordinaire, hat connoisseur, master of the lenses, Jody. What's up, Joe?
What's good, man? Like I always say, you can't forget we got Uncle Tom, the master GM. Steeler fan. Hopefully, he's here to make some right picks as he did last year when we did the mock draft for this coming up Thursday. So we'll see what happens.
Glad to be back.
We've got a huge mock draft today. The one and only Second and Two mock draft.
Set up. Now I've got, the lid going on, trying to be like Jody. And after watching Chase yesterday, I figured, after all this hard work, we're getting down close to the grind. I brought in some local Aggie, Colorado State. And I might crack one open here on the mic. But, when I get done drinking my beer, I always like to put it in my special trash can. The Spencer Rattler can. So that's where my cans are going to go. Hold on. Let's hear this.
Dude.
Oh
my God.
Hey,
Spencer Rattler's going to think this podcast hates him.
No, Hey, don't mind if I chase a few beers in this pod.
There you go. Oh man, my man's bringing out all the puns from his upper sleeve.
He had me rolling yesterday when I heard that. Oh my gosh! So
we bring on guests for different reasons. Chase knows his reason. Oh man! So the way this is going to work today, each of us has been tasked with being the GM of one of, I believe we all have 10 teams. Each of us has a team that had 2 picks in the first round this year. I also took the first pick of the second round, pick 33 overall with the Carolina Panthers. But each of us are the GM of one of 10 teams today, picking in the first round and or very top of the second round in the case of Carolina. And we try to stagger the picks as much as possible, but it doesn't always work out that way exactly. Everybody has at least one team that has 2 picks in this round. We had a common rule here, which is if you're going to trade, you have to trade with the team that you are also the GM of. No trades between the 3 of us. So that's kind of what we worked out. I think it's going to be fun. How are we feeling, fellas? I think it's going to be good.
I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm dying to see how this plays out.
I just hope I can remember who I chose for each team, because normally I got a cheat sheet on my other screen from you sending me what we're talking about, but now I'm gonna have to scroll through my phone before every pick or something. Get it all figured out.
I think Joe, if you do want your cheat sheet, I'm pretty sure this is shared to you. You just have to go look.
I'll go look right now.
Yeah. I know you need your cheat sheet.
Yeah.
But I think last year we didn't do any trades, and I'm excited because this year we did. We made it so that we could be trade friendly here, and I think that'll give us maybe more accurate predictions in terms of how the draft goes. I think last year we nailed 8 of the 32, so we were 25%. I went back and looked at that, and I think that's what we ended up going at. 8 of 32. So this year, really excited. The first team on the clock, the Chicago Bears, and their special GM for this mock draft is me, TB. I think the Bears could go a lot of directions here. Just kidding. They're going with one guy. There's only one guy they're going to take. I'd love to make it sound like they're going to take someone else or that there's anyone else in the mix. I feel like I've seen some stuff recently where people are like, well, it's not actually Caleb Williams. They're considering J.J. McCarthy. I'm like, none of that's true. There's one guy they're taking. They need the franchise quarterback. Am I crazy, or are we all here? No, there's one guy they're taking.
No, he's the one of one this year, according to everything we've seen since the Super Bowl.
Yeah, there's no doubt he'll be the number one pick. So at least we
All
got
right,
one
so
right.
without further ado, the Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC. He's 6'1", 215. We talked about him on last week's pod with the quarterbacks. Obviously, we know he loves to play make out of structure. He thrives there. He's got the touch throws, the escapability. And I think at the end of the day, the big question with the Bears is going to be, can they get him to make the easy plays, avoid the mistakes, still be a playmaker off schedule, and again, avoid the disastrous plays that we saw at USC. Once again, you hope that the Bears give him a better supporting cast around him, better than what USC or even Oklahoma were able to give him during his time there. Obviously, they brought in Keenan Allen. There's a new offensive coordinator there. I think it's a much better structure and supporting cast than what Justin Fields had. I still have my doubts about whether or not it's actually very good.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, hopefully he could get a nice line around him. I mean, they brought in some good pieces, good weapons, I should say, but the line is what the main issue was last year, I think, and we'll see what happens this year.
Yeah, the biggest thing is he's starting off on a better foot than Justin Fields ever had. So, we'll have to see what happens.
I think my biggest concern is probably with coaching. I think there was a high expectation that Eberflus would get fired, and instead it was the OC who took the rap. So now you have a new OC, but let's say they don't win this year, because I think the expectation is they have to win this year. And if they don't, does he get another year? Because it kind of feels like Eberflus this is his another year. You know what I mean? So if they don't win and he gets fired, well, of course, then that means the OC's out as well. So now you're talking about Caleb Williams with a new OC in year 2. I know we're getting down the road, but if we're talking about how this could go wrong, to me, it's that, hey, early on, they don't get him to play within structure as much. They're not winning a lot of games. He's making a lot of turnovers and tough decisions. All of a sudden, Eberflus and the staff are out, and then you're coming in next year with a new OC, and Caleb Williams is on, second OC in 2 years. So those are all the ways that I think this could go south. As much as we like the talent and potential of Caleb Williams, I don't think this is a surefire, hey, you're getting Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck with the top pick. It just doesn't feel like that's necessarily what you're getting. I mean, he could still, obviously, we've talked about the potential, what he could turn into, but I guess we'll see. Wait and see is what we're saying.
They got pick 9. They only have 4 picks this year, but next year they have a ton of picks, 2 in the first round. So I mean, we'll see what they do with that 9th pick. So maybe that'll help them out.
Just say another point to add to what you were saying is another team that had that was also the Patriots with Mac Jones, where first year balled out, made playoffs, second year lost some of the dudes. Now my guy got shipped out, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. All right. Next team on the clock, the Washington Commanders.
Oh man, so I figured they needed a quarterback here. It only made sense. They got rid of Sam Howell. They had Jacoby Brissett last year, but my guy is getting older. So, I mean, maybe whoever they pick here, could possibly learn from the guy. And we talked about him last week. We did the quarterbacks, of course. And I went with Jaden Daniels from LSU. 6'3", 210. I know I said I wasn't really a fan of the guy personally, but, I mean, the Commanders always had nice receivers. It was just a matter of them getting the ball, That if there was anything, throwing it wide, they could make a play themselves. But if you're throwing it deep, Sam Howell was a wild card. It might get intercepted, So I'm hoping, we comped the guy to RG3, at least you did. And so I'm assuming, they could run that back. They got a new coach. Obviously, he's more defensive minded, but I mean, they've had RG3 in the past. That's who guys comp to. I could assume they could make some magic happen with this guy. We talked about, like I said, throwing the deep ball wasn't my biggest thing that I liked from him because that's all he really did. But I mean, if you got Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. to throw to, why not, right? So that obviously he could run the ball like crazy. You know, they could run plenty of pistol and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a nice breath of fresh air for the Commanders.
It makes sense to me because they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, and if you look at all the previous quarterbacks, whether in college or in the NFL, Kyle Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Caleb Williams, and they brought in Marcus Mariota, who's been a running quarterback.
That's what I was gonna say.
It feels like that's where they're leaning
Yeah.
towards. So wouldn't shock me.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing with bringing in Mariota. You know, you always kind of look at like, okay, who's going to be the veteran quarterback and what kind of style of play do they have? Could that tip you to the pick? What's funny is, you know, they could go with any of the guys here because they're all kind of mobile. It's not just
Yeah, true, very
Jaden
true.
Daniels is the best runner, but like JJ McCarthy and Drake May can both run pretty efficiently as well. Caleb Williams, if he were to be on the board for some weird reason, like all those guys are pretty mobile and can run. So it doesn't really feel like in this case it tips it too much. Did see that they brought in all those guys for a visit together, and Jaden Daniels seemed to apparently not be thrilled about that. His camp, I should say. Now, again, this is that kind of time of year where you don't know what's actually true. Everything is kind of like, oh, this, maybe that, maybe this, and so you never really know what you're getting from these reports and who's gaining what from putting this out there. So who knows how true or real that is, but I do wonder if this isn't like the surefire. Like if you asked me a week ago, it felt like this was definitely the pick. Now it's kind of like maybe not.
Yeah, that was one of the strangest things I've seen a team do is bring in all these guys, and like they were trying to see who the alpha male was going to emerge out of all these people being there. So yeah, that was wild, but I do like the pick.
It's one of those.
Fit.
It's one of those things where you wonder if like the team is so in their own head about who to pick. They do this just to like, are they verifying? Are they, do they already know who they like? And now they're just making sure, or like, it just, sometimes it feels like we get too much information or we do too much.
This sounds like their own like litmus test where they had CJ Stroud being dogged because he didn't do well on some test. And then all of a sudden, like, as the best rookie quarterback out there, you know what I mean? This is their version of that.
It does feel like we never really truly know until we see these guys play. All right. Next on the clock, we've got the New England Patriots special GM. Tom, what are we thinking?
Well, I am thinking that obviously you're picking in the top 3 quarterback, but if I was New England, the way that team is structured, if now that Drake May is available, if I'm Minnesota and I took that 23rd pick, I know I'm being aggressive to move up to get a quarterback in this year's draft. And, they talk about Drake May and Josh McCown coaching him in high school. So there's like a relationship there. Mm-hmm. How much do they love him? I don't know, but they're definitely moving up. And if I was the GM, I would talk to the owner and say, hey, look, we're going to get 11-23, a first next year, and it probably would cost an extra third because they're coming up for a quarterback. So I would listen, but when I think it comes down to it, the owner's going to be like, I want the quarterback. And if I'm selecting a quarterback here, and I don't feel like the quarterbacks that are left deserve to be 3rd overall, but I would probably take Drake May right here for New England, just because I do see a lot of upside with him. Like you hear people talk about arm of Herbert. He could play like Josh Allen. He just needs better coaching. Like if Minnesota moved up and got him, like that's a perfect situation. New England might not be the best situation. Hopefully they surround him with all the coaching staff that he needs. But for this pick in this draft, I would select Drake May with the Patriots right here. I wouldn't take the picks. I'd take the quarterback. So
I do wonder, I've seen a lot of people kind of throwing a similar situation out was when the Bills were able to draft Josh Allen, and they did a similar thing prior to the draft where they traded up and they got another pick, and they had 2 first-round picks, and everyone thought they were making the jump into the top 5. And then instead, the Bills sat pat and waited until they found the perfect trade up for them, which was at 7, and Josh Allen was still there, and they were able to do it while keeping the other first round pick still. They didn't trade up as high. They waited, let the draft board fall the way they wanted it to. They didn't panic, and they didn't have to give up as much to get up to get Allen. They knew Josh Allen was their guy, but he was still around 7. I wonder if the Vikings, if they like May and McCarthy or either one, and they feel like one of them could fall later, if this is where you don't trade with New England and it does fall this way where New England makes a pick and the Vikings are waiting to trade up with someone maybe around 6, 7, 8 instead.
Right.
So I could definitely see that. I mean, I think May to the Patriots makes a ton of sense. It feels like if he's either he or Daniels is going to be the pick here, depending on who the Commanders don't take.
Yeah, true.
He fits all the measurables that you want. And if you're trying to start over, removing yourself from the Bill Belichick era, they haven't made this kind of splash in a top 5 pick. I mean, since when? I can't think of it. Not in my lifetime, basically. So it makes a ton of sense. I could definitely see this happening.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You obviously had many years with, Tom Brady as your quarterback. This dude fits the classic frame of a quarterback, 6'4", 223, big stature, could see over everyone, is what everyone likes to say. With the shorter dude, they can't see over the line. And, I think I had him middle of the pack for my quarterback ranking. So, I mean, if you're in need and you want a classic looking dude, he's definitely the one.
Yeah. I'm not as big of a fan. I think he's big time boom or bust potential, but I wasn't a big fan of Josh Allen either. And that's who a lot of people think he is. So it kind of makes sense that maybe I just have a thing against these rocket arm, big strong arm quarterbacks who are a little inconsistent in college. But all right, here we go. Cardinals are on the clock.
Yeah, so I had the Cardinals, got their 2 picks for them. First one, I think, kind of made a lot of sense. They got rid of Hollywood Brown, or he got released in free agent. Who knows what the main case was? But they've had many receivers since they lost Larry Fitzgerald, right? So I think they needed a good replacement since then. Have someone more for the face of the franchise at that position, and what better than Marvin Harrison Jr. right here from Ohio State? I think Kyler Murray could definitely use another weapon for him to throw to. He's got decent. I think Zach Ertz's still there. I don't even want to start assuming positions that he still has with him, but later on you'll see I definitely had a doozy with the other pick. That one was a lot tougher than this one because you take the best available, what you need. So the Maserati Marv, as they were calling him, was definitely the obvious choice here.
Yeah, I mean, if you're keeping Kyler around and that's who you want to build the franchise around, you got to give him some weapons. This feels like basically the other, besides Caleb Williams going at 1, it feels like Marvin Harrison Jr. has been a Cardinal at 4 for months. Those 2 guys feel pretty set in stone in terms of who's going where. Obviously, there could always be a surprise with the trade here, but I'd be hard pressed not to take Marvin Harrison Jr. if I was the Cardinals. I mean, he's the perfect guy to go with. To go with Kyler. I just think you're getting a bona fide number 1 guy.
Yeah, I agree. You feel like the Cardinals can do what they did last year, trade down and trade back up and move up and down the board again. But at some point, you got to start getting Pro Bowl players. And when you drafted Larry Fitzgerald, and we all I think you had him comped, right, to Marvin Harrison Jr.
I had Odunze comp to Larry Fitz. I had
okay.
I had Maserati Marv comp to Randy Moss.
It looked like he froze up.
Yeah,
Anyways, I was just saying, you went with Larry Fitzgerald last time and it worked out. He got you to a Super Bowl. So, yeah, I agree. This would be a good pick. It's time to start putting some Pro Bowlers on that roster. So,
We'll see. Hopefully he comes back. We'll definitely
Yeah,
keep it
he's
on
got the
pause
next
right here.
pick. Chargers, baby. I'm excited to hear what he's gonna do with these Chargers.
Yeah, that's a fun one for sure right here.
Harbaugh's first pick is as a head coach. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to see where he goes with this pick. People talking about, is he going to go O-line and not the receiver? So I'm kind of curious to see where Trevor goes with this pick.
And they just got J.K. Dobbins signed officially too, so not
Yeah.
really a need there at running back.
Are we shocked that he's not signing some of his brother's players from the Ravens? He already has another running back from the Ravens that they signed in the offseason. So yeah, the brothers are obviously sharing information. So
All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Everyone can hear me now?
yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
Okay, what I was saying about Marv was that I comped him to Randy Moss. I had Odunze as Larry Fitzgerald, but
Yeah.
regardless, still a great pick. And sorry to all the listeners for the technical difficulties. I'm sure that was a fun time for y'all. Moving on to the Chargers. I have the privilege of being the Chargers GM here. Looking at the history of Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers' new GM, who was brought up in Baltimore, this feels like the prime spot for a trade. Could they stand pat and take Malik Neighbors to give Justin Herbert a weapon, kind of replace what left with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams kind of leaving this offseason? It's very possible. Could they stand pat and draft, a premier tackle like Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu? Yes, all of those things are true, but it feels like the way the Chargers are sitting right now, this just feels like they can get a king's ransom in a trade, and trade back and still get one of the guys that they really want anyway. Who's trying to come up? That's going to be a great question. Could it be Minnesota trying to come up for JJ McCarthy or Drake May? Obviously, I still think, every year there's kind of that surprise in the top 10. Last year it was Houston, right? It's like, oh, is Houston going to take
Back to
the
back.
premier defender, or are they going to take the quarterback? And then all of a sudden it was like, why not both? And now you're
Yeah.
seeing Houston trade back in, and they're trading up, and they've got CJ Stroud and the edge rusher, right? This to me feels like something that the Bears, Tom earlier talking about what will the Bears do at 9. I could see the Bears saying, we want Nate. We need to come up. And so that's what I've got going down. I've got the Chargers trading back to 9 with the Bears trading up to go get Malik Neighbors. They only have to move up 4 spots, but they make sure that they get Caleb Williams, a bona fide dude. And now all of a sudden you look at that Bears receiving core, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Malik Neighbors. That is a sick trio, about as good as it gets in the league right now. Keenan Allen's older anyway, so like that guy may not be around forever. You want to pair Caleb Williams with a guy who's going to be there for his career potentially. And I think that guy that does that for you is Malik Neighbors. I mean, teams, imagine having to cover DJ Moore and Malik Neighbors vertically down the field while Keenan Allen works the middle of the field. It's going to be tough, man. Obviously we talked about Neighbors, what he does so well, the slot routes, the releases, hit you with the double move. He'll be great on that secondary part of the play when Caleb Williams is breaking the pocket. And, now you've got Neighbors out there running around. I just think that you put those two together, now you have something really cooking on offense, and the Bears could be a team that teams do not want to see when you do something like that.
Definitely.
It makes a ton of sense because you see DJ Moore only has 1 year left on his deal. Keelan Allen, 32, only has 1 left year on his deal. So for them to get a young receiver with Caleb's, that makes a ton of sense. And I did a real quick calculation on the draft picks in the exchange because the Bears only have 4 picks this year. So they had to give the Chargers their 9th, their 76, which only left them 1 pick after this. But you come away with Neighbors and you come away with Williams. The Chargers also got they're both second round picks next year. So now Harbaugh is building a team that he wants. So this makes I love it.
Feels like a win.
I love
a
this
win-win.
Yeah, love it.
I could see Ryan Poles being aggressive here and doing something like this. And I could also see the Chargers feeling like they're okay with building slowly, but the right way. And then in
Trust the
Harbaugh's
process.
mind, yeah, I like this a lot. I could see. Obviously, I was the one that orchestrated it, but I could definitely see this happening. And it's not something that a lot of people are talking about. So it's kind of that like, oh, what's the surprise move of round one? I could see this being it.
Honestly, and the Bears are at 9, and look how good these receivers are. I mean, when was the last time we saw 3 good receivers in the top 6 like this? You're this close. Do that move. Go up there. Get that dude for your new quarterback. I love it, dude. Awesome.
Agreed.
Awesome. So, all right.
All right. Here we go. The New York Giants with their special GM, Tom, are on the clock.
You took my guy. I mean, is there you lose Saquon Barkley. Waller doesn't want to know if he wants to come back. The Galladay signing a few years ago blew up in your face. There's no playmakers on this team. Neighbor was the dude I was hoping for. I love Rome right here. I think Rome is my favorite receiver of everybody. But Minnesota was trying to call to get with the Chargers to go get J.J. McCarthy. But he got more, Harbaugh got more picks. So Minnesota's calling the Giants. You know, you signed that deal to Daniel Jones. It's a huge cap hit this year. If you got rid of him, it's a huge dead cap hit. I think they might be still interested in building around him. As much as they hate leaving out of 6 right here, the Vikings are moving up and making a trade. So the Giants are going to get 11 and 23. And Vikings are now on the clock, and they are going to select J.J. McCarthy and put him around the best situation of any team looking for a quarterback in this draft. I mean, J.J.'s got to be in heaven right now if this actually happens. Whether they move up to 5 with the Chargers or like in this draft at 6, J.J. would be in heaven, or Drake May, however it turns out. But yeah, right now, Vikings, Drake May at pick 6.
It definitely feels like the pivot point of the draft is Chargers at 5, Giants at 6, what those two teams do, whether they stick and pick or trade out or, whatever it is. I mean, this feels like the most pivotal point where, like, depending on all the dominoes are going to fall based on what those two teams do. So for both teams to trade out in our mock draft for, again, teams coming up to get receivers and quarterbacks, kind of seems to be the theme of this draft. All the guys we have picked 1 through 6 so far have either been a receiver or a quarterback. It makes a ton of sense. You look at J.J. McCarthy feels like he fits Kevin O'Connell's system. Comped him to Matthew Stafford, who O'Connell coached in Los Angeles with the Rams, went to the Super Bowl with him. Kwesi Odafomensa feels like a guy who's going to take some calculated risks coming from, everyone keeps mentioning where he came from, his background before he got into football, coming from the financial world. This feels like it has the Vikings written all over it. And it kind of resembles what I talked about with the Bills earlier when they wanted Josh Allen, where they kind of waited, didn't get all the way up, but got up a little bit later in the top 10. So you don't have to give up as much draft capital, but you still get your guy. Makes a ton of sense. I think McCarthy would be fantastic with O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and all those weapons. Yeah.
Perfect situation.
I was going to say, this is probably the team that any quarterback in this draft would love to go to, considering they already got some good receivers, not to mention, you get basically I would say it's probably similar to Kyle Shanahan in terms of like the quarterback play. Like if you could do it with Kirk Cousins, and that division alone is already pretty easy. Like it's a good spot to be for sure.
Yeah, I think it's the coaching staff more than anything. I think it's a great place for any quarterback. So awesome.
All right. The Titans are on the clock at 7 with Jody, special GM.
Yeah, so here I kind of figured it was two certain positions. We could either go O-line again, as they did last year with Peter Skoronski, or we can go receiver here, considering, they brought in D-Hop. They got Will Levis to be the quarterback now for sure. And do you want to give the guy weapons to throw to, or do you want to have him be protected and not have to scramble around all too much? So for me, I think it made sense to take Joe Alt here from Notre Dame. I mean, you get to pair him with Peter Skoronski that you got last year. You could use Peter Skoronski inside, outside, doesn't really matter. Joe Alt, you could use him in that tackle position. Make sure he could protect the blind side if you need to, and then on top of that, maybe even throw him some game. Give him a nice little big man TD maybe down in the red zone. You never know. But I think it just makes sense to take the tackle here for sure.
I think what you said, I think it makes a ton of sense. Might have been tempted to go receiver until, they've invested in receiver a lot, even though it hasn't quite worked out for them. They let A.J. Brown go, and then it was, okay, we'll go draft Treylon Burks, and then it was, okay, we'll go sign D-Hop, and then it was, okay, we'll go sign Calvin Ridley. So they've really invested a lot there. It would feel like a lot if they drafted another receiver, even though DeAndre Hopkins is getting older. So it makes sense if they go O-line here and really rebuild that O-line. Joe Alt, Peter Skoronski, man, that would be a duo on that offensive line. I could see that a lot. I like it. It matches, I think, how Rand Carthon wants to build a team. It also feels like you're giving your new head coach, who's an offensive guy, another piece to build that offense with. Makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. After watching their offseason and that spending spree they went on trading for Snead, the only thing they didn't really address was the offensive line. The most chalk mock pick is Titans and Alt. And I'm just like, watch, it doesn't happen. I mean, it's like the most chalk of any mock, but it makes the most sense because that was the one area they didn't address. So, yeah, that's a good pick right there.
All right. So next on the clock, we've got the Falcons, and I am their special GM today. All right, the Falcons, they need help defensively. This feels like, okay, if we're taking a guy here, we're taking, an edge guy, whether it's Dallas Turner or Jared Verse or maybe even Latu. Are we taking a corner? We could use help there. Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell. Unfortunately, though, 8 feels too rich for any one of those guys, the way this draft is positioned this year. It feels like the Falcons, not a lot of people have talked about them as a team that trades out here, but I think they're a sneaky trade out candidate just because of their needs. I mean, offense, they could take another offensive player, but man, the last 3 years you've invested in, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. Can you really afford to take another top 10 skill player? I mean, you really need help on defense. You brought in Kirk Cousins. You have all the skill guys. Feels like you should be okay offensively. So really, they need help with defense, but it just feels like the draft this year, there's not a lot of value being placed in that top defender. Most times on a lot of these drafts is not going in the top 10. I really like Jared Verse. I think he's worthy of the number 8 pick. I don't feel like a lot of these NFL teams do think he is. If the Falcons were to stay, that would be the guy I would tell them to pick. But I think they can get a king's ransom and still get a really good defender. They have a really good relationship between another specific organization where they just got their head coach from. That's the Los Angeles Rams. A lot of rumors that the Rams love a very specific receiver. There's an infatuation with Sean McVay and getting that true X receiver when you look at the history of things, right? He traded for Sammy Watkins, traded for Brandon Cooks. He drafted Van Jefferson. He signed OBJ in the middle of a season. He's been looking for that guy, that kind of receiver for a long time and hasn't really ever had it. Feels like this is the spot for the Rams to trade up and draft.
Let's
Rome.
go.
This was the most shocking one in the draft for sure.
So this has become, when we started looking at this mock and started formulating some stuff, I can't say that this is like completely out of my own head. I've seen some people who have talked about the Rams loving Odunze, and you start looking at the history of McVay and Snead, it just makes a ton of sense. this could be a spot where they do trade more picks away to actually make a pick this time, though. You know, the old F them picks model. They're going to have to give up a lot to move up from 19 to 8. I know, Tom, that you're our draft chart guy. Did you have it charted for what they'd have to give up to go from 19 to 8?
it would, to make the trade work. It was a first this year, a second this year, a first next year, and a second next year. So I mean, it's not quite as much as the Julio Jones going Browns and Atlanta trade, but if Rome's still on the board at 8, I think Atlanta is going to get a ton of teams calling. I feel like you made the right decision to have a team move up to get Rome. So, and him going to the Rams would be incredible, bro. Like, yeah, I love it. I love it, man. It's going to be amazing. Puka and Coop, like, crazy. Yeah. If it comes out, yeah, it would be sick.
Well, and here's the other thing. It's kind of an underrated need for the Rams because Cooper Kupp is not getting any younger.
No.
He's dealt with a little bit of injury since his record-breaking season. I think he can bounce back and be a productive player next year. I'm not saying that. I just could see the Rams sitting here saying, hey, we maybe have 2 more years of Coop, and we need to make sure that we're ready for when he's gone. And, hey, we've got Puka, but it can't just be Puka.
Right.
So it makes a ton of sense. And you get all those guys for like a 1 or 2 year window. Now you're really going for it. Now it's like
the fact that don't you guys have 11 picks in this year's draft, the Rams? Like they can afford to, you know, move up in the draft this year. I mean, it's a lot to do it, but the guy's worth it. I think he's that special of a player. He's my favorite receiver of this draft. So I almost feel like it's a guarantee that somebody's moving up. I always have the Colts moving up to get somebody like Rome at 8 with the pairing with Quentin Richardson and Pittman and stuff like, but I could totally see the Rams doing it. It's something they would totally do. They don't mind losing first round picks. It makes total sense. And I love that you did it. I'm like super stoked right now. So yeah, I love it that you pulled that off.
I think it would be a ton of fun. Did you guys happen to catch Rome Odunze on that podcast? I think it was the Pivot podcast recently, talking about Puka Nacua and what he looked like at Washington as a young buck.
No, I didn't.
And he was telling him like, no, we always knew Puka was a dog. He was like that. He just battled injuries at UW and then transferred to BYU, and they didn't really like get him the ball at BYU. But he's like, no, at UW they knew Puka was like that. Like he was mixing Trent McDuffie in practice, and like they were like, dude, McDuffie was a dog, like one of the best corners in the country, and Puka was like mixing him in practice. So
even though Atlanta has moved so far down, what you've gained in return, there's still going to be that pass rusher or that corner or whatever is going to be
at
there.
19.
But, you know, when you also have Kirk Cousins so old, I mean, this could be a future quarterback in next year's draft or even the year after that. Like they're planning ahead. So even though they've moved too far down, there's still going to be a good defensive player because we still haven't even picked a defensive player yet. So
we picked quarterbacks and receivers, and Joe Alt threw 8 picks, but it feels like that's how this draft is going to go.
Right.
It's insane. All right. Now on the clock, just so happened with the trades and whatnot, I put myself back on the clock here at 9. The Chargers, remember earlier, traded back with the Bears. Now the Chargers are sitting here, and it's like, okay, who do we like? Basically, the receivers are gone now, which they probably knew would likely be the case when they traded back from 5. So they would obviously have to be okay with missing out on the receivers to trade back to 9, but they're still in that top 10 range where they can probably get a future franchise, Pro Bowl type of offensive lineman. Feels like a very Harbaugh pick here. This is how he built Michigan into a national champion. So they're going O-line, and they're going one of my favorite, nastiest offensive linemen in the draft, Talisi Fuaga from Oregon State.
God. Yeah.
He's a 6'6", 330-pound mauler at right tackle. Some people say he can play guard. Really depends. I really think they take him to play right tackle with Rashawn Slater at left tackle, and now you have quite possibly the best tackle duo in the league. And then not to mention, like if you want to run a bunch of zone blocking, which, traditionally Greg Roman's a little bit more gap scheme, but I think Fuaga is he's just a mauler. He really, you want to run the ball with this guy. you're
Most
going to want to
definitely.
run the ball behind him. Like he was great in zone
Yeah.
blocking. He can be an efficient down blocker and gap scheme stuff. He's also a pretty good pass protector. He was great in play action pass stuff. It feels like that's how the Chargers are going to build their offense. Fuaga is the perfect pit for Joe Hortiz, Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, what they're trying to build around Justin Herbert. And I think Chargers fans may not like it because it's not sexy, but I'll tell you that this is how Harbaugh's going to build that team.
He's my favorite right tackle in the draft. And I love that he has flexibility too, like he can move into guard if you need him to. And he's just nasty. So yeah, it feels like a Harbaugh pick.
All right. We're back. Tom, you traded out before at 6. The Giants are now back on the clock at 10.
No, that'd be the Jets. That'd be Jody. 10. I traded to 11.
Did I mess that up?
Yeah, Jody's up.
Dude,
Jets.
I messed it up. There we go. Okay. The Jets are now on the clock. My apologies.
At 10. Out of order. No, you're chilling. So for the Jets, I mean, looking at the team needs, it says tackle, center, safety, quarterback. Quarterback's kind of shocking because at this rate you're not getting many from this draft. You know what I mean? You could maybe wait that one out. Still got Aaron Rodgers there. Maybe next year you could look at someone with the last name named Sanders. But obviously you got the O-line help that they need right here. Tackle and center. You saw Aaron Rodgers get hurt within the first 4 plays that he played there. Zach Wilson was scrambling for his life every game. So I went with Olu Fashanu out of Penn State here for the tackle. Definitely one of my favorite pass blocking tackles that we've seen during that episode. I just think it makes sense to have, the dude who has a good movement laterally. He has a nice punch. Definitely was able to keep people still after they try to bull rush him. He had quick feet to get him back underneath his body. I think it just makes sense they need the O-line help because you don't want to have an aging Aaron Rodgers getting hurt again within game 1, coming back in this next season right here.
I love that you did this as a GM. Everybody thinks they're in win now mode. Brock Bowers is the pick, and it very well might be. But when you have 2 tackles in their 30s, haven't played a full season in Moses and Smith from the Cowboys, like, dude, you need a tackle. Last year, the Steelers jumped you and took Broderick Jones when you probably were going to take Broderick Jones. As much as everybody thinks it's a win now, Brock Bowers, get the lineman because they haven't played a full season in forever.
Yeah.
So I love
and if you want to win now, you need Rodgers healthy.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I love that you.
That was their answer last year, and
Right.
clearly didn't get to pan out.
Yeah. I like it as well. I think Fashanu is probably the best pass blocking tackle in the draft. So now we get the run on tackles. Now we've gone from just quarterbacks and receivers. Now we've got all the tackles going as well. So the top 10, if our draft is correct, is going to be all quarterbacks, receivers, and tackles. But that's what this draft is. That's what this draft is deep in. Those offensive linemen and those receivers are going to be going off the board in the first 3 rounds like crazy because there's just so many good ones. But that he fits really well with what the Jets are probably going to be offensively too, because he's such a good pass blocker. So, all right, we're on the board with the Giants at 11 after trading back with Minnesota.
If we traded it back, Giants fans might be upset that I didn't take JJ McCarthy because they don't like Daniel Jones. But picks are valuable, and if you look at this team, there's, like I told you earlier, there's no weapons on this team. They went and addressed the offensive line heavy in free agency. Got Jeremiah Laramua from how do you say his last name? Lamura?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not going to guess.
Yeah. Well, he played for the Raiders. They've got him penciled in at the left tackle now with Evan Neal as the backup, the former top 5 tackle from Alabama. They went and got John Runyon to play guard. So they addressed heavy on both defensive line with the Brian Burns trade and getting Phillips from Buffalo. So they really addressed the trenches right here. So the fact that I am so upset that I didn't take Rome Odunze at 6 and traded out, I'm going to take Brock Bowers and give my team some actual weapons after not having Barkley and no receivers. So I feel like getting him at 11 is a good deal. I feel like he's a top 10 player maybe in this draft. So let's get the Giants some weapons right here with Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I think I have Brock Bowers as the 4th ranked prospect on my board overall. So this is great value if you can trade back and still get what I project as a top 5 player in the entire draft. I mean, he's a guy that we comp to Travis Kelce. I've seen some people talk about like Dallas Clark, so maybe not quite as explosive as Kelce, but just the ability to get open, the yards after the catch. He's got great body control. Like the guy is going to be able to move all over the formation. He's a matchup nightmare. It feels like he's a bona fide playmaker, and especially if your current tight end, who's supposed to be your matchup nightmare, who's like
Darren
almost
Waller.
never healthy, is considering retirement, this feels like a move that you have to make. And then if you do have the privilege of having both of them, well, great. You can be like the 2011 Patriots if you want to be. But yeah, it feels like they need a weapon here, and he's definitely the best one on the board. I like it a lot.
Yeah, Brian Daboll feels like he's a guy that will be able to get him in the matchups he needs to have. So it's a good fit and it's a good need. So.
All right, so next up at 12, I think this one we finally get to see a defensive dude come off the board.
Boy.
The Broncos had gotten rid of Simmons. I'm pretty sure they took that hit on the cap. We kind of teased it during that episode too. I think it kind of made sense. I've also seen the guy come here on like people's mock draft, so it made perfect sense to me. I'm going with Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. We said you pair him up with Pat Surtain, you got the best duo out there locking everyone down. I mean, even if they don't go with a cornerback here and they take a safety, I think they just need to address the defensive positions for sure. Obviously, quarterback's another big one. They lost Russ to the Steelers, took that big cap hit too. But I think more importantly, they at least need defense. And then with all the quarterbacks being gone, it kind of just makes sense to go that route instead here.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people penciling in like Bo Nix here. I don't know, man. 12 feels early.
For
I'm
him,
not
I
a
would
huge.
agree.
The ceiling on Nix is not as high as I think you'd want with taking a guy 12th. Penix is another guy that people have talked about here. What his floor feels too low. He feels too boomer busty to me to take here as well. If they take a quarterback here and it's not JJ McCarthy or Drake May like sliding down to them, if it's one of the other guys, Bo Nix or Michael Penix, it feels like they're reaching for one just to draft one.
Definitely.
I still think there's a reason that they signed Jarrett Stidham a couple years ago. I think they would be okay going into this season with Jarrett Stidham as the guy if they needed to in order to get through the year. So I don't think they have to reach for a quarterback here at 12. I like that you're having them go defense and saying, like, let's just try and have the best cornerback tandem in the league with Quinion Mitchell and Pat Surtain. Like, let's just get better defensively. Obviously, this could be a spot for an edge guy, but Quinion Mitchell might be the best defensive player in the draft based on what a lot of people are saying about him. So I don't hate it. It's kind of not one that I've seen commonly mocked, but I don't hate it.
Not only is he the first defensive player going off the board, but he's from the MAC.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That is true.
But were your pick I like is because the Broncos only have 12 and 76 and no second round pick. Like this could be the pick for the Colts, or it could be for Jacksonville where they really love the kid. They're going to move up, get the corner, and now they're picking later. Now they maybe take Nix, and now they've got a second round pick, So, or if the Broncos might not take Mitchell here, but this could be a spot where somebody's going to move up for the first cornerback in front of the Raiders kind of thing. So while it might not be the Broncos in our mock, it might be right. So, it makes sense.
All right. That being said, the Vegas Raiders are now on the clock. Tom, what you got?
Well, I tell you what, if somehow Jaden Daniels doesn't go number 2 and he falls to number 3, I feel like the Raiders are going to do everything they can to get Daniels. I think that's the apple of their eye. I think they want to go up and get him. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I know they could use a quarterback, but I'm not taking Nix or Penix here. I really liked how the NFL teams last year didn't let Levis go in the first round. He fell to the second round, and people spent Friday night trying to move up to get Levis. Like, I feel like that's where this quarterback with Penix and Nix should go. So the Raiders, I think, would maybe possibly move back up into the first to get Penix. Or that they spend, Thursday night going into Friday trying to give it Penix. So I'm not going to take a quarterback here. Right now, their current right tackle is a 7th round pick from 2 years ago. They just cut DJ Fluker. But I'm surprised Fluker was even on a freaking team. So they are hurting at right tackle. But we had a run on tackles, and the guy I wanted, Fuaga, went to the Chargers, a division rival. So looking at their secondary, it's awful. I'm gonna take. I do like their safety from TCU. But I'm gonna take the cornerback from Alabama. I am gonna take Terrion Arnold, give him some defense, and then we'll try to move up to get our quarterback later, either at the end of the first round or maybe the beginning of the second on Friday.
I love this pick just from a culture fit. Like Terrion Arnold embodies what Antonio Pierce wants to build in Vegas, which is like physicality, playmaker, football intelligence. Those are the 3 words that we use to describe Terrion Arnold, which was just he's just a beast, man. He was kind of overlooked going into this year at Alabama. We talked about that on that pod. And I think he fits exactly what Antonio Pierce is trying to build. This makes a ton of sense from his standpoint, as long as Tom Telesco is not trying to, like you said, trying to trade or take a quarterback. It feels like this would be, and the Raiders are another team that I kind of like the Broncos, where it's like, he did say like, hey, Aiden O'Connell did enough that you're going to have to go through him. Like, would they be willing, if they can't get the guy that they want, are they willing to go into next year with Aiden O'Connell as the quarterback, or, you don't want to reach for one if you don't feel like you have to. So I think they're in a similar situation as the Broncos.
I think the talent is so good in the top 15. Don't take a quarterback. And plus, we just had the Broncos and Raiders in the same division take quarterbacks, and you got Patrick Mahomes. So, why not?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ton of sense there. I agree. I like the pick. All right. I'm back on the clock here with the Saints at 14. The Saints feel like they're still kind of living in that proverbial just terrible spot with the cap year in and year out, and somehow they keep kicking the can down the road, but their defense is aging. Offensively, they're not a whole bunch of spring chickens either, but at least they've infused their offense with some young talent recently, guys like Chris Olave. Feels like defensively they need to add some guys, especially their pass rush. Cam Jordan's been there for like ever. And they need to give him a running mate. They need to give him someone else to rush the passer with. I think this is finally the spot where we see a pass rusher come off the board. I've got Jared Verse, first pass rusher off the board, going to New Orleans. He makes a good bit of sense in Dennis Allen's scheme. I projected him as a 4-3 end. 9 times out of 10, a lot of guys nowadays are like, oh, you could play 4-3 end or 3-4 outside linebacker. That's why we classify guys as just edge defenders. But Verse is one of those guys where it feels like he's truly an end, like a 4-3 end. He's that big 6'4", 260, super, powerful base. He'll be good against the run, but he's got some really good moves, pass rush moves to get to the quarterback. He finishes well. I think he fits in what Dennis Allen is doing defensively there. So I think that's the pick for the Saints.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the Saints really could use a tackle. because if Ramczyk is injured as bad as it says and might not be able to play this year, and then Trevor Penning, who did not pan out as a first pick, if the Bears can't make that trade to move it to the receiver and they only have 4 picks, I feel like the Saints, because they're always willing to trade, like they're going to try to get up to possibly take a tackle. But there was a tackle run, so Verse makes a ton of sense right here to get one of the better defensive players that are on the board. So, but yeah, watch for the Saints to possibly move up to get in front of this tackle run, because they really need some help on the offensive line.
All right. The Colts are on the clock.
All right, Colts being baller. Let's see. I think the Colts should try to get up and get Rome if there's a possibility. I would love to see Rome out there, or even get up in front of the Jets to take Brock Bowers if he falls to the Jets. Just get up and get another weapon for Richardson. But in this draft, they're not doing that. They really need some cornerback help. They even got Julius Brents from K-State last year. There's nobody really on this side. They re-signed Julian Blackman at safety. They went and got one of the better corners. Nichols re-signed, and Kenny Moore. So they've kind of like did a lot of work on their secondary, but they really could use a corner. But man, there's Dallas Turner is on the board still. I usually don't have him falling this far. And if you don't get Arnold and you don't get Quinn Mitchell, I feel like why not pair Dallas Turner with freaking Kwity Paye to help your secondary? Because you did spend a lot re-signing your own guys and bringing them back. Julius Brents is in his second year. There's less pass rush available in this draft than there are corners, so you can go get another corner to pair with Bentz down the road. Go ahead and get the pass rusher here in Dallas Turner and pair him with Kwity Paye. I also think that Brian Thomas Jr. might be a play in here to add a weapon with Richardson. But for this draft, I'm going to take the edge rusher and Dallas Turner.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, you could definitely save the cornerback spot for later and definitely get some pass rushing to help put pressure on the quarterback and make sure they got time to or not. I mean, the quarterback doesn't have time to throw the ball, and then you let the defense cook on their own, defensive backs, I should say. And I think it definitely makes sense to take the edge rusher here.
I am, famously when we did our edge pod, was not the biggest fan of Dallas Turner. I like his teammate Chris Braswell more than I like him, but I feel like there's some stuff he has that you can't teach, which is why he's going to go higher, because he has some of those traits. I still think he's a bit of a project more than people would like to think. But that being said, by most draft boards, he's probably, best player available here, which makes a ton of sense for the Colts. Chris Ballard is usually pretty good.
I honestly believe that Verse and Latu are probably going to go before him, depending on a team. But I feel like he could be the third edge rusher going in this draft. It could be the other two guy first, depending on the medicals for Latu. But I would not be shocked if he falls out of the top 20.
It feels like Turner and Verse are kind of in competition for who goes first. Latu seems to be third because of the medicals, even though people think he might be the most polished guy, which I would tell you he's the most polished.
I think so.
And then Chop Robinson's kind of sitting there in the 4 spot, and those are your 4 guys that people like to go in round 1 pretty much universally at this point. But I don't hate the pick for the Colts. I just think he's more of a project than maybe people perceive at this point. All right. Here we go. Seahawks on the clock. And that's me. Seattle, kind of in a transition year, right? Mike McDonald taking over. Mm-hmm. John Schneider's still the GM, but you don't have that Pete Carroll type of team anymore, and it's going to be different. They're going to look different. They're going to be built different. There's some questions with, is Geno Smith the long-term answer at quarterback? Do you need to transition away from that? What are they going to do? They did trade for Sam Howell to be his backup. Maybe he's the guy of the future. Maybe not. Depends on how they see that. They took corners the last couple of years that have worked out really well with Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. And even still, with that being said, defensively, it feels like they need some work. So it feels like a spot where they go defense, quite frankly, unless they surprise everyone and take a quarterback. Feels like with the Sam Howell trade that maybe they don't take a quarterback. So I would lean towards defense here. They need to stop the run. I think this is the spot where you see the first defensive tackle get drafted, and that's Byron Murphy out of Texas. 6'1", 308, super lateral quickness, elite lower body strength. He's got a motor that never stops. He seems like the perfect 3 technique to go play in Seattle. Mike Macdonald's obviously transitioning that defense from what it's been, so we'll see what he wants to do there. But, you think of in Baltimore, like Justin Matabuke, what they were able to do with him. Byron Murphy could be that guy. So I think this makes a ton of sense for Mike Macdonald's first pick.
Yeah, I agree. This is where I've been leaning with Seattle, and with the new head coach being defense that where I've been thinking they might go offensive line inside. I'm thinking, you know what, let's take probably one of the best players available at 16 and Murphy and get my new defensive head coach, a defensive guy, to build what he needs. So, especially if you're going to have freaking Rome on the Rams.
Mm-hmm. All right. Moving it to 17. The Jaguars are on the clock.
Oh, my good old buddy Trent Baalke. I never know what this guy's going to do. Am I allowed to rip a fart like he did in his freaking pre-draft press conference the other day? Did you see that?
No,
Yeah.
In mid-sentence, and then said, "Oh, excuse me," and just went on along like nothing happened. But anyways, looking at the Jaguars, I'm not in love with their wide receiver. They spent a ton of money. Gabe Davis, 3 years, like $33 million. You got Christian Kirk. You got Zay Jones. I feel like this could be a spot for Brian Thomas from LSU, wide receiver here. I know that after this year, Cam Robinson and Walker Little both playing left tackle right now, like Walker Little's the backup. Maybe with as rich as this tackle offense or draft is, that maybe they go tackle. But man, when I look at their secondary, they brought in Darnell Savage. Let's see who else they got on there. They got Tyson Campbell, a second-round pick. They brought in Ronald Darby, who's been in the league 10 years. You got Andre Cisco at safety, free safety, and Antonio Johnson. Like, I'm just not in love with their secondary. And Baalke, we go back to when he took Walker from Georgia over Hutch, because he went with the size and the speed and all the traits. Like, I think a guy that you could get to help fix your secondary, I would go Cooper DeJean. He kind of feels like a Trent Baalke guy with all of his measurables and his athleticism. You could use this guy as a chess piece in your secondary. So I've always kind of thought they would go corner, but we had the other two go off. A lot of teams are saying Cooper's a safety in the league. But I feel like you can start them off at corner, and then for Jacksonville, they can make a chess piece out of them to make that secondary stronger. So I'm going to take Cooper DeJean instead of going wide receiver Brian Thomas here.
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough choice because you did see, they signed Gabe Davis, but they watched Calvin Ridley walk in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the receiver pick for sure because they need that offense to bounce back. But with what they do schematically, man, Cooper DeJean being that Swiss Army knife, I'd love him in that defense. I think that'd be a ton of fun. Joey knows how much I've been enjoying watching and breaking down Jaguars defense for the last couple of years because they do so many things that I like to do schematically. So Cooper DeJean fills that like nickel star position that you can pretty much do anything with him. Safety, corner, you name it, he can do it all. And he'll give you some added bonus in the punt return game. So I think that's a sick pick.
I think they land a special player. So I love him.
All right, next up we got the Bengals at 18. This one, I wanted it because I just figured they got a lot of needs in terms of like that we've been hearing about. Obviously, they let Joe Mixon go. They franchise tagged their guy, uh, T. Higgins, right? Tyler Boyd's kind of out there, maybe possibly looking at a trade, hopefully. Although that's what T. Higgins said as well. They're going to have to pay our guy Jamar Chase here too. I don't know if they already have. But I was like, all right, they need an offensive dude. But it's none of those positions that I just mentioned. We're taking a tackle here. I'm going to Marius Mims. I think they've had tough run over at the O-line position the past couple years. Clearly, that's kind of what led to Joe Burrow getting hurt last year, and unfortunately, didn't get to finish it out with him. And so I think it's just another need that they've had for the last couple years that they're going to fill right here with the Marius Mims out of Georgia.
Shout out to Duke Tobin. He's been there forever as the de facto GM. 26 years. And it's funny because you don't really ever hear about him. You don't ever really hear about like Duke Tobin and what he's done there. But I think this pick is fantastic given that they did lose Jonah Williams in the offseason. So, you need another tackle. And he's a right tackle, so that fits. You have who's the tackle that signed last year?
They got Trent Brown there on a 1-year deal this year.
Yeah, so they got Trent Brown and they've got
Orlando Brown.
And so it feels like Marius Mims has so many physical tools but he is a little bit raw. So it's perfect because you can let him learn from Trent Brown for a year, and then he's your guy that steps in and protects Joe Burrow long term and you really solidify it with Mims and Brown long term at the tackle spot. So I do like it a lot. So, I think people are overlooking him a little bit because he's a right tackle and he is a little bit more of a project, maybe not a day one starter, but this is a perfect situation for him.
Yeah, this is the perfect fit. You signed Trent Brown on a 1-year deal. And he can just spend the year honing his craft. He only had so many snaps in college. So I absolutely love this pick. I mean, you got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You got high price in Orlando Brown, reset it with a young guy, give him a chance to learn. I think this makes a ton of sense.
All right. Next on the clock, it's finally the Falcons. Back up after trading out of pick 8. They're back to pick 19 here. And we talked about the Falcons needed, right? It was pass rusher and corner. Okay, well, they watched 3 corners go off the board. They watched 2 pass rushers go off the board. And the guy that I think a lot of people consider the most polished pass rusher in this draft is still there. If that's the case, and this is how this draft goes, they're running this card in to the commissioner. They are taking Laiatu Lasu and hoping that he's healthy and feeling like they finally have a real pass rusher. I mean, they've been trying to take pass rushers for years. You go back and it's like Tack McKinley and guys like that, and they just haven't ever been able to hit on one. And it feels like this might be the time where they finally get one. 6'4", 265, super adaptable, resilient, plays with great hands. That's why people love him in terms of being polished. He reminds me a little bit of like what you were getting with Byron Murphy last year, who, oh, by the way, who coached him, Raheem Morris in LA. Now you're getting a similar product in Atlanta, a guy who's just ready to go, like pro ready right now, going to contribute. He'll go give you 10 sacks just like Byron Murphy did. I think he's super fluid in the hips, plays with great hands. I just think you're getting probably the most polished guy. He may not have as high a ceiling as a Dallas Turner or a Jared Verse, or even a Chop Robinson, but he's got the most polished pro-ready game right now. He would help the Falcons tremendously, I think.
Yeah, if the Falcons pull something like this off on real day draft, winners. I think this guy is going to have multi-year double-digit sacks in the league. If you come out here with, all the picks you got from the Rams and Latu, you're winning. So that would be awesome.
Yep. All right. Pick number 20, the Steelers, finally on the clock for Good old Tom.
Yeah. Well, what can we say? It's been a crazy offseason. It's an offseason like I've never seen the Steelers have. It's nothing I'm used to. It's actually almost kind of hard to figure out what they're going to do. You trade Deontay Johnson, you left a huge hole on the other side of Pickens. Some people would say you bring in Arthur Smith, you plan on running the crap out of the rock. Your second receiver is your tight end and Pratt Freiermuth. The other receiver can wait, but I definitely think they're thinking long and hard if Brian Thomas is on the board here. I've already tried to get him to like a couple teams and he's still here. So there'd be one thought that Brian Thomas, he kind of reminds me of Pickens, where you just send him deep. So, I mean, two guys on one side just running freaking go routes while you're trying to run the ball, but you're trying to run the football. And you can't run the football without an offensive line. You moved up in last year's draft to get Broderick Jones. He played right. They said during the combine that they want to move him to left. Dan Moore, the left tackle who's been there since his rookie year, is on the last year of his deal. Cooper's not here. Sorry, Coop. I wanted you so bad, brother. I want you on my team so bad. I tried to get you here, but it didn't work. So we are going to take one of the most versatile offensive linemen in the draft. We're going to take Troy Fautanu from Washington. Watching him at the combine, watching him move. If you're Arthur Smith's offense, you run a lot of wide zone. I want this guy out there moving. I like the fact that it feels like he can play guard if you need him to. He's on the shorter side for a tackle, but his arms are so long. So I think we move Broderick to the left. We start him off at right. Next year, James Daniel is a free agent, and after watching the Rams spend so much money at guard, maybe we don't want to spend that money on Daniels, and we can maybe move Troy Fautanu inside and go another direction at right tackle. But I even heard, I think Daniel Jeremiah say the other day that some teams are penciling him in as maybe one of the better centers in this draft. And that might be the biggest hole, but for us to fill is that center because we let Mason Cole go. But you just don't see centers being going in the first round. It's almost like running back. Watching Creed Humphrey fall to 62 to the Chiefs, it just you don't see them going in the first round anymore. So I think they're gonna stay away from center. This is such a good tackle draft. Let's take a tackle that's pretty versatile. We can move him around. The last time we drafted a Samoan named Troy, it worked out pretty good for us. So let's take the big Samoan Troy from Washington.
Oof. Yeah, basically, a lot of the stuff I've seen is he's the most versatile offensive lineman in the draft, and it makes sense. Like he can play center guard or tackle, so you have a guy who can just swing anywhere you need him to go. This feels like a very Steelers pick. Just rebuilding that offensive line for whoever the quarterback ends up being, whether it's Russell Wilson for the year or Justin Fields for the future. But you got to build up that offensive line. This makes a ton of sense.
Yeah,
those are the smartest dudes too. The ones that know every position on the line. They just got to they got to know everything on both sides. Like, not to mention the different hand placement when you're in your stance, or if you're on one side compared to the other. It's just those are the dudes you love having. Just the Swiss Army knife, as you would probably say, for the O-line right there.
Of all the years I've drafted for the Steelers, you've always been able to rely on certain things. Wherever Mike Tomlin and GM were at the pro day, combine visits, and player visit, if all three of those lined up, they usually draft the guy. There's only two players in this year's draft where all three of those criteria match up. It's Mims, who just went. Otherwise, that probably would have been my pick. And Nate Wiggins. So I'm kind of going off beat to what the Steelers normally do. I literally, since 2010, if you take those three criterias, that's who the pick is going to be. Broderick Jones was that pick last year. But I'm not taking Nate Wiggins at 20. Sorry, I'm just not going to do it. I'm building my offensive line. We will need to run the ball. So, and they're doing stuff I've never seen do before. You're trading Pickett and Deontay Johnson and bringing in all these new quarterbacks. I'm never seen this before, so I'm going to go off script too, and I'm going to take Troy Fautanu. So,
all right, Jody, you're on the clock with the Dolphins at pick 21.
For me, this one, I would say they definitely need some help on defense. They had plenty of injuries throughout last year that kind of kept them in a little lull on defense where, their corners, one week you got Jalen Ramsey and the other dude that plays on the other side, and the next thing you know, one goes down. A couple weeks later, they're both healthy, and then the other one goes down. Late in the year, their defensive lineman went down. Like, it was just constant injuries to that defense. So I think they kind of definitely need to address that, get someone younger in there to help fill those roles when someone goes down. So for me, I went with Chop Robinson here at the edge position from Penn State. I think, I think they had Bradley Chubb go down. I think I'm not mistaken. I don't remember the dude on the interior
Jalen
also
Phillips
went down.
too.
Yeah, there you go. And so it just
Van
makes sense. They
Ginkel.
definitely, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
All those dudes got hurt, and then they lost Christian Wilkins in free agency. Yeah, it feels like they
that's
need to
the other
repair
one I
that defensive
wanted
front.
to mention too. Yeah, so it just makes sense that they get someone on the line for sure.
Makes a ton of sense. I mean, gosh, that would be a trio of pass rushers: Jalen Phillips, Chop Robinson, and who am I missing right now? Bradley Chubb. The three of them.
Yeah.
If all of them are healthy and they're doing, but Chop's thing is that first step is so electric. It's one of the most
Best.
impressive things you'll see from any of the pass rushers in this crew. And if he develops all the other things that he needs to develop and pairs that with that first step, dude, watch out. You've got a bona fide game wrecker. So, I think him and Brad and Jalen Phillips long term, if you can keep Jalen Phillips healthy, is the move. And then maybe you kind of figure out what you can get from Bradley Chubb if you do something like this. But makes a ton of sense. They really need to repair that unit. They did lose Van Ginkel in free agency as well, so you lost some depth. So it does feel like this is a spot that they could go either front, O-line or D-line for them is going to be where they're going to go with this pick. I imagine. I guess in theory they could go corner to replace Xavier Howard, but feels like they're really needing front help up front in the trenches. So I love the pick, Joe.
And I've never went this way with this pick, but when you break it down, like you guys just said, I forgot about the injuries to Phillips. I knew about the Chubb, and then you bring up Van Ginkel. I never thought about edge rusher for them, but holy crap, you need a freaking edge rusher. And having three good ones, as long as they both come back healthy, ready to go, it makes a ton of sense. And I've never thought about that. And you guys kind of opened my eyes to that one.
Way to go, Joe. You get all the credit.
I like it, dog.
For me, I kind of just, what made sense to me, like each team, I broke it down where I was like, all right, who do I think they need? Or what position, I should say, more importantly. And then it was like, all right, let's see what people are saying they need. And I kind of just pieced the two together. You know what I mean?
That's what you do. Put the puzzle pieces together, man.
Yeah. Trying to build a frame, get it all pieced together. All right, let's see what the next piece is.
So the Eagles are now on the clock. They're an interesting team. Another kind of team that you don't know where they could go. They need a lot of help in the secondary specifically. I know that, they tried to address the secondary a little bit with bringing back CJ Gardner-Johnson. Still feels like they need more help there. The guy that we're about to talk about, I think, Tom, you comped him to Darius Slay. Kind of makes sense. This guy would go to the Eagles. That's Nate Wiggins. Smaller guy at 173 pounds, but has great man coverage skills, unbelievable transitions, great hips, was locked down at Clemson. As long as that weight doesn't become a problem where he's too light, he should be a good player. Obviously, there's a big worry with him being only 173 pounds, but I think Howie Roseman's willing to take the chance on the talent here to try and help that secondary. Just they need to be better. So obviously there's been some rumors about them maybe trading away A.J. Brown. And if that were the case, then Brian Thomas Jr., who we've talked about for 6 different teams, right, is in play here because he's kind of in that mold, the big body, deep threat receiver. So maybe this is Brian Thomas Jr. if you're looking to get off of A.J. Brown. But I went with the secondary. I went with the bigger need here. So I went Nate Wiggins.
And I think with the Eagles having picks 50 and 53 in the second round, and if you look at their entire team, there's starters everywhere. They're aging. Lane Johnson, maybe a tackle here, but their corners are old. And where we had Quinyon Mitchell going to 12 to the Broncos, if they're in love with somebody, don't be shocked if they make a trade with the Broncos to go get the corner they want. That's why I loved Joey taking Mitch right here, because they got 50 and 53. They can move up if they want. And if they're in love with the guy, don't be shocked if they do. So, corner feels like where they would probably go. So, but don't be shocked if they moved up in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, definitely a spot that they've also needed the past couple years as well, where we get to talking about him every week, where it's like, oh, this guy got toasted, oh, this guy, this and that for their defensive secondary. So they definitely could use the help for sure.
All right, the Giants, after
right.
trading with the Vikings, they're now back on the clock at 23. So to be clear, they get this pick from the Vikings in a projected trade that came originally from the Browns.
Let's see. We addressed that playmaker room by adding Brock Bowers. And I've already talked about how they've added so much in the trenches on the offense and defensive line. I mean, could you really add another playmaker right here? I mean, why not? I mean, who's your receiver? Freaking Slayton. So I mean, they could address a wide receiver right here. I mean, but when I look at their secondary,
Michael Penix.
Oh, the Giants fans are gonna freaking hate me. No, I loved how
we're sold on Daniel Jones.
I loved how the teams last year did not go after Will Levis. It feels like every year you're reaching for a quarterback. Like, let's take that in the second round, or if you really feel like it, move back up. When I look at their secondary, they got Deonte Banks last year in the first round. They haven't re-signed Adoree Jackson. They lost Xavier McKinney at safety. So there's two of their starting people are gone, are no longer with the team. It might be a little early for Kool-Aid McKinstry right here, but I want to pair Kool-Aid with Deonte Banks' first-round pick next year. I mean, you do have CeeDee Lamb. You got A.J. Brown as of right now. You just re-signed. The Eagles just re-signed with the receiver from Alabama, right? So, I mean, we've already taken one player on offense. I'm going to take this second pick with the Giants, and I'm going to take Kool-Aid. Try to make my secondary a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like it. He can do a little bit of everything because he can play some press man. He can play some zone. Lets you get creative defensively. They've got some new pass rushing blood in there. Giants defense could be kind of scary. You do this, right? So I know Giants fans, they want to replace Daniel Jones. Shoot, I think Brian Daboll wants to replace Daniel Jones.
Right.
But if you came out of this with getting a haul for that number 6 pick and then still coming out with Brock Bowers and Kool-Aid, come on. Those are two high pedigree players from the SEC that I think are going to be ready to contribute to your team pretty quickly. So can't be too mad if that's how you come out.
Yeah, I mean, if you can move up, in the second round, I think they have pick 47. If you can figure out a way to move up to get Penix or Bo Nix and add them with Daniel Jones, and who's the cat they got from Seattle?
Tyrod Taylor. Oh,
Drew Lock.
Drew Lock.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't know he was there.
Do that. Don't reach right now and take a quarterback. Just make your team better. So we'll go defense. They need some help in the secondary pretty bad. Losing Xavier McKinney. I mean, Cooper DeJean would be awesome right now. So if everybody values Cooper as a safety, he could be available at this point. So,
all right, America's team on the clock with special GM Jody. Let's go.
This one I had a little bit tougher go around. I was thinking, they definitely need a running back. They lost Zeke a couple years ago. Tony Pollard just left. Like, you got Deuce Vaughn. I don't know if they brought anyone in the free agency yet or not, but for me, once the Eagles let this guy go, I figured he would be going there. Obviously, you guys talked about him having some possible injury issues or, uh, I don't remember what the words were, but you know what I'm saying? He off field issues or something with his body. So I went with Jackson
Yeah.
Powers Johnson out of Oregon. I think the O line here for the Cowboys is getting older, as we talked about a couple teams already, and if you put him there at center, you could let Biadish maybe take over the guard role, not have to use him at center and or guard, through the season, and it gives the dude a good chance to just work in the run game up front, and hopefully they can find that running back down the road later in the draft. Because from what we said, the running backs were projected to go. I think it made sense to just leave that alone at this point and take someone up on the front line.
Jackson Powers Johnson is one of my favorite offensive linemen in the whole draft. You guys remember that that episode we talked about him. He's a center, so he's not quite as valuable as some of the tackles. Now, recently, there's been some real cause for concern with some of the medicals, which has happened late in the game. I didn't really hear that much about him in terms of those injury issues earlier, and it kind of just popped up. Obviously,
It's the
when we
rumors
study
we've
the
been talking
tape,
about too.
that's true, right? It's true. This one seems to be a lot of smoke, though, in terms of a lot of teams being worried about him. Like I saw some rumor that one team took him off their board.
Dang,
So
altogether?
so I don't know. It still felt like the whole time, though. I mean, I had him as a top, I think 17 prospect. I think he was the 17th guy on my board for a center. Like that's pretty impressive. I think he's a friggin' 10-year anchor of your offensive line, right? He's Jason Kelsey to me. So whoever gets him, they're getting a dude. As long as he's healthy, I guess, and that would be the thing. But does feel like with the Cowboys, when they've had their best years in the last 20 years, it's always been because they were really good up front. So this makes a ton of sense to me. In terms of, I know you talked about Biadish and all that, but I mean, get good players, right? Figure it out after that. So
I agree with you. I think
it.
my favorite person to watch on tape this year has been this dude from Oregon. The injuries I've been hearing are concussion, soft tissue. He was at the Senior Bowl. Pulled a groin or a ham. He got hurt there. So, but it reminds me a lot of Landon Dickerson the year that he came out from Alabama. It's like, do we really want to take? He's amazing. But 2 ACLs. He's recovering from right now. But the Eagles took him, and dude is a freaking stud. This dude is a stud. The Cowboys need some help on their line. I love the pick. I think the injuries are probably a little overblown if it's just, the concussion thing, which, is concerning, but a lot of it's soft tissue stuff. So I love the pick for the Cowboys.
Yeah. All right. The Packers are on the clock.
Oof. All right, man. That's another team that I look at their roster and it's like, God dang, dude, that's a pretty good roster. Like, there's not a lot of holes, but I think they would really like a corner. I don't think Eric Stokes from Georgia has lived up. I mean, you got McKinney, you got Jared Alexander. Rumors are they're in love with Cooper. They have 2 second-round picks. Like, dude, that's another team that could be trying to move up to get their guy in the secondary. But when you break their roster down even further and look at projections of the 2025 free agency, 3 of their starting offensive linemen are free agents. Tackle, center, or tackle, guard, and I think the other guard maybe. I have to go back and look. But then there's no backup center. There's no backup right guard right now on this team. So there's a lot going on in this offensive line next year. And it looks like a lot of it could be used inside. So I am going to go Graham Barton, center guard from Duke, who can help fill in this spot. Like this, what do the Packers do? They're always looking for the future. They've done it a million times with their quarterback. So if you looked at the future, their line is going to be probably hard to fill next year with so many vacancies. They already have 2 vacancies right now. So let's go ahead and get one of the most versatile offensive linemen and put him in the mix. And I think he'll find a spot on the roster this year. He's that good.
Yeah, I think he's maybe not as athletic as Fontenot that you had drafted with the Steelers. I think that's a guy who can legitimately play all 5 spots. Graham Barton is a guy who I think in the NFL, in college played across the offensive line, but in the NFL could play either guard or center, either guard spot. So 3 out of the 5, I think, is realistic for him.
How many snaps did he have at left tackle too? Like, whoo.
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying is in college he could play left tackle. I think everyone's looking at him at the NFL level, and it's like, okay, wait, he's not as, I think, athletic as Fontenot, and that's why you see him going a little bit later. But I think he's a little bit more of a mauler, like he's a finisher on blocks.
Yeah.
You want to run the ball behind him, that's for sure. So that makes a ton of sense with what they do with Matt LaFleur. So I like that a lot. It's a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Pick 27, the Buccaneers. Played around a lot with this pick in terms of what do the Buccaneers need. Defensively, they're always kind of building. I think with Todd Bowles, they're always trying to get better there. They've made a lot of picks on defense since they signed Tom Brady, 3 or 4 years ago. The majority of their team building has been defensively, and then recently it's been kind of rebuilding the offensive line. Obviously, they signed Baker to that deal this offseason. I played around a little bit with the idea of quarterback here because is Baker the long-term guy? I know they gave him sort of a long-term deal, but it's actually not really, and you dig into the details of that contract. So I could see them. It wouldn't absolutely shock me if they went quarterback, but even still, it's 26. If they took one, I think it's kind of hard because I don't really know because it's not Dave Canales as the OC anymore, right? He left to be the Carolina head coach, so they got a new OC. So I got to see philosophically what they're doing or what he wants to do. It's harder to understand, what they might do and what they might want at quarterback. So I thought about it, but not for too long is what I'm saying. And ultimately, I went with just kind of like, who's the best player available? Who's going to help them the most? I think I've read a lot of stuff recently about Ladd McConkey being a guy that's going to go as the 4th receiver. People are saying he could be the 4th receiver over Brian Thomas Jr., over Keon Coleman, over Xavier Worthy, over A.D. Mitchell, over all those guys because people value what he does out of the slot so much. He's a savvy route runner. He's really quick. He's going to go higher than people, I think, originally started mocking him. He contributes in all phases of the game, because he's actually a really good blocker from the receiver spot. I think this is why so many people have started comping him to Cooper Kupp. So I think he's going to help his team win, whoever drafts him. So I wouldn't be shocked. Tampa, they've got Godwin, they've got Mike Evans, but Mike Evans, they kind of look like they might not have him back. They finally did come to a deal with him, but it's only 2 years. They may need to be looking to get a little younger at receiver and have options long term. Ladd McConkey would fit in with those guys now and in the future. I could see Brian Thomas Jr. We've talked about him a new number of times now.
He's going to every team in the league.
And it's funny because I have A.D. Mitchell, comp to Chris Godwin. So that would be interesting if they took him because I think they're very similar players. But yeah, I think Ladd McConkey's the guy here, and it's kind of a surprise even to me.
Man, I've always had Ladd going in the first round. I love Ladd, but I can see where you could go receiver here because you look at their pass rush. They lost Shaquille Barrett, right? And that Tyron guy from yours hasn't really quite panned out. So now, but the rushers are gone. Interior offensive line, Jay's gone, Barton's gone. Where do they go? And I love that you took Ladd. I love Ladd. I'm glad
Well,
that we got him going the first round because at some point I was going to take him. So,
well, it's funny because like their two biggest needs, I think, are guys are. I mean, really, the three biggest needs are linebacker,
Warner.
running back, center. Those guys are. You're not taking them here at 26, right? Like they're just, and the one center you might take is gone. So to me, you're waiting until round 2 to address those other real needs. So just take BPA, right?
Yeah.
And that to
Mhm.
me, based on what a lot of stuff I've read, not necessarily BPA on my board, but
Right.
based on a lot of the things I've read, it feels like he might be the best player available here. So Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, and plus we have already had the run on corners. They've traded Charlton Davis to the Detroit Lions. So, I mean, literally, there's a lot of stuff they've been pegged to are gone.
All right. Who do we have next?
All right, so we got the Cardinals back on the clock. This one was a tough one for me. You guys saw it in the chat.
Oof.
I definitely wanted a cornerback. I thought I had the choice of who I wanted, but ultimately, I was reading things wrong and wasn't able to get who I wanted here. I wanted Nate Wiggins, and I thought that one made sense. Obviously, he's gone. So I was like, it's similar to your Jared Verse pick, where you can get someone to cause ruckus up front, making it easier for your corners that you already have to do what they got to do. So I went interior D line here, Jerzon Newton out of Illinois.
Ooh.
I kind of just I needed someone to plug up the gaps, make sure good in the run game, good in the pass game, and make sure your corners that you currently have could do what they got to do, and you could address the issue down the road in the draft.
Oh, man, that's an easy pick
Grady
right there,
Jarrett.
dog. Woo!
Grady Jarrett, man.
Love it.
That's who he is. I'm telling you. I love Jerzon Newton. Like, I remember thinking when you made this pick, 27, like, just my first thought is, gosh, this is so late for him because he's
I was
so
like,
good,
how is he
man.
still there?
How's he? Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with he's a little smaller. It's a similar. I'm telling you, he's Grady Jarrett 2.0 because it's the same things that people said about Grady Jarrett coming out. But this is a snag for Jonathan Gannon, dude. If they come out of this draft with freaking Grady or Jerzon Newton and Marvin Harrison Jr., people in that NFC West should be upset because that's a haul. That's a great draft. Those could be two of the best players at their position in this draft. Gosh, that's a sick pick right there.
I love
It was a
this
tough
pick.
one, I know, because you wanted a different position, but
Yeah. Well,
you got a
he was
good
on
one.
my mind, but I also didn't remember if you guys had already taken him. I was like, I don't want to go 2 for 2 on missing on who I want right here. And then you sent the list of who you had like best available still for certain things. And I was like, yes, I definitely need him here.
Gannon needs to start getting some players for his defense. So, yeah, I love the pick. Love the player, too. Love watching his tape. Holy crap. So,
All right. Jody, back
Perfect.
up with the Bills.
Yes, sir. So this one, we kind of seen them just implode their receiving core altogether. So I'm gonna just throw it out there. That's where I'm going with this one. We seen Stephon get dished out. We got Gabe Davis gone as well, as we talked about with the Jags, and it's just like obviously it's a need. They got defensive need as well because they're getting a little older over there, but I think it makes sense. You got to get a receiver now, help Josh Allen out, give him people to get the ball to. And I went with Xavier Worthy out of Texas. It's I would say probably faster than Diggs. I couldn't tell you 40 times. I'm just throwing things out
Yeah,
there,
no, he is.
oh, way faster.
but yeah, it's just the cannon arm as we talked about with the quarterbacks already from this draft too. Even that's how we see Josh Allen. Just let this guy run. He could be like a Deshaun Jackson to Josh Allen right here. Just crazy yak ability, speedster for sure. I think it makes sense.
My comp for Xavier Worthy was T.Y. Hilton. So this makes me think of like Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton era in Indy, and you get that with Josh Allen, Xavier Worthy. It's not like I think the receiver that most people would probably pick here for the Bills, because it's kind of another small guy paired with Khalil Shakir, who's another small guy, and they kind of watch Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs leave the room. So I think most people would guess like more like a Keon Coleman or a Brian Thomas or even A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy's teammate. But you start thinking about the possibilities with this guy and Josh Allen, and I like it a lot.
Or our guy Brian Thomas is the faller in this draft. It's like somebody hooked an anchor to him and he's just dropping to the bottom of the ocean. I'm shocked that he's still here. But man, Chiefs are getting closer to Brian Thomas, maybe. Let's see what's going on.
All right, next on the board, the Lions.
Ooh, my Lions. My Super Bowl pick last year after their second night in the draft. They killed this draft. And man, they were so close. They need help on defense. Would it be not the Lions to move up in this draft and get the guy they want for their defense, whether that's a corner or a pass rusher? Like, go get the one piece that failed you last year and go get it. That totally feels like the Lions are going to move up in this draft, but not in this one. Corners are no longer there. Man, Brian Thomas is still on the board. Should I take Brian Thomas, just add more weapons to that offense? Like, damn. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give him some help on defense, give him a little pass rush, and I'm going to take Darius Robinson from Mizzou. Another reason I did this is because there's only 13 players invited to the draft, and he's one of the 13. So that tells you how the NFL feels about him. And there's no way in heck I'm leaving this mock draft and this guy's not going in here. And it feels like a Campbell kind of guy, and it gives you some pass rush inside, outside. He's pretty versatile. So let's not let this guy fall out of our mock. He's going to Detroit right now.
The thing that's tough to evaluate with Darius Robinson is like, where do you play him in the NFL, right? You know, I think some people think he's an edge, but the guy is 6'5", 300 pounds. How many edges are 300 pounds? Right? Like, that's not really what it is. He's super long and physical, though. To me,
For sure.
he's quick enough that he can play in that 4-eye, 4 technique, sometimes a 5 if you're more of a 3-4 team. Maybe he's more of a 3 technique or defensive end in a 4-man front. It's kind of tough to tell. But to me, I think his physical play style makes more sense near, what they call the bubble between the tackle and the guard, where teams are trying to run the ball a lot. To me, that's where he makes his money. He does feel like a Dan Campbell guy, though. Like, he's a bite kneecaps type of dude. I like it. It embodies what Detroit has been building. It makes a ton of sense. He's a talented player who, again, is a tough eval, but super talented. And to get him this late, pretty good draft.
I tried to get Detroit up in this draft because I feel like they're a team that knows they're this close. So let's go for it. So don't be shocked if we see Detroit moving up in this draft to get a certain player.
According to you, there's like 8 teams moving up.
I only had one team move up. Well, no,
the Saints, the Colts, the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Lions, Packers, all of them are moving up. The Packers, they're all moving up.
The ones that I think move up are the ones that have the extra second round pick. Like, if there's a player you're looking for, it's the Eagles, it's the Packers. Detroit doesn't have that ammunition, but I feel like they're that close that maybe they'll move up. So those are the teams. It's like the Redskins have 2 first-round pick, or Redskins. Commanders have 2 second-round picks. Like, I could see them moving back up in the first round to get a tackle for their new quarterback. So, I mean, I'm just looking at teams that have multiple second-round picks looking for a possible move up for a guy they want.
All right. The Ravens are now on the clock.
Wow.
And I think the Ravens are sitting here, and it's like, maybe offensive line. Maybe another edge rusher. Maybe maybe a corner, whatever, But then you look at the board and they're saying, wait a minute, Brian Thomas Jr. is still there? It's finally the spot for our guy. We've talked about him since the middle of the first round. It's finally here for him. 6'3", 210, unbelievable size and speed. He's a deep ball threat. He's just a big play waiting to happen. We finally get some Lamar Jackson, some real weapons. They parted ways with Odell Beckham in this offseason. So now it feels like, okay, here's your Odell Beckham replacement. You put him with, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and like Derrick Henry at running back. Like, they're a juggernaut offense. He feels like a perfect Raven. It's amazing that we let this guy drop this far. It doesn't feel super realistic, but every pick felt about right. So, this does feel like a far drop for him, but at the same time, if he's here, man, I think the
What
Ravens
a
would run the
fit.
card in.
What a fit. Nice compliment to Zay Jones. Man, look at the Ravens. How many receivers have they taken in the first round? Bateman, Hollywood Brown. Like, they just keep going to that receiver well in the first round. But if Thomas is there with that running game of Derrick Henry, like, damn, that's a nice fit. I could see you running that card up right now, brother. That's a good call right there.
All right, pick 31. The 49ers and Jody are on the clock.
Oh man, this one was another doozy. I thought what I had in mind is what they needed. None of it is what I saw anywhere. And I was like, well, let's see what I can make happen. And we've kind of seen our guy Brandon Ayuk start rumors, maybe his family member, I should say, where he's like, this guy's getting out of there. He doesn't like the spot he's in. And so for me, I took a receiver here. Thought about Debo having injuries, middle of the season. You kind of have a tough time. You're running Ray McLeod, right? That's their other receiver they got who fills in. It's like, all right, you got to get a young dude in there to help fit this role. And I went with Keon Coleman out of Florida State. For me, I think he was my favorite receiver that we looked at. He makes the crazy catches, big frame. Definitely does some things that you could see Ayuk doing. Maybe a good fit for him, and I think it just makes sense to give Brock Purdy more weapons on the offense as he already has a million of them.
Yeah, the contested catch ability is insane with Keon Coleman. He's fearless going over the middle, and what do we know that the Shanahan offense loves to do? Play action pass, intermediate, middle of the field stuff. And Coleman's not afraid to go into the middle of the field with that big frame. He'll beat you vertical. There are some questions about his ability to create separation. He did only run the 4.6 at the 40, but he also ran the fastest gauntlet drill
Gauntlet, baby.
time. So he's got sufficient play speed in my mind to be a legit guy. This feels like if you talked about him in November, October of the college football season, people had him penciled in as a top 10 guy, right? A legit receiver prospect here. Now, since all the stuff we've gone through, the Senior Bowl, the combine, all that, all the pre-draft process stuff, he's kind of fallen. And in a lot of people's minds, he's a second-round pick. I think he still has the talent to be a first-round pick. That's why I like it. It is your Brandon Ayuk trade insurance. But even if you don't trade Brandon Ayuk, now look at all the weapons you're giving Purdy. So I like it.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, you saw Brandon Ayuk stay 6 more days and we got fireworks. Like, he knows possibly he's about to get traded. So I think it would be smart to take a player like Coleman. And you brought up that gauntlet. I mean, the dude ran like 21, 22 miles an hour, which paired
like that, yeah.
really close to Puka Nacua, what he did in the gauntlet. So if he's running that fast on a straight line across the field, it feels like a really good fit for the Niners. So, you don't see him going a lot in the first round, but we're having a run of receivers now where this draft is about offensive line and receivers. And now here comes the freaking run at receivers. It makes sense if Ayuk or Debo are gone during the draft this coming week. So, yeah, heck yeah. It's a good fit. Niners, Coleman. Woo.
All right. Last pick of the first round, the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock. What are they considering, Tom?
Wow. You see, you got the Rice ordeal. What's going to happen with him? You definitely feel like he's going to be suspended probably the first 4 games. So, but there's been a run on receivers. I mean, A.D. Mitchell is still there, but we've heard some stuff about how he has like a diabetes thing, and it kind of explains where it looks like he's not going full speed all the time in his college tape, where like he has a struggle, he says, with his diabetes during games. So I'm gonna stay away from wide receiver. cornerback would be nice after losing Snead. They've got like 2 young guys starting at corner right now with from 2 years ago in the draft, one in the 3rd round and one in the 5th round. You still got McDuffie slided in at nickel, but I don't see a corner worth taking right now. So they are missing a tackle on their team. There's no way in heck I'm letting Latham fall out of the 1st round. I have him as a top 23 talent in this draft, and he's still available. So I'm going to take Latham from Alabama and give the Chiefs a tackle. I'm just not going to let this guy fall out of the 1st round. A lot of people are not into him like I am, but I think he's worthy of 1st round pick. So I'll take Latham for the Chiefs.
Yeah, there's a million different ways the Chiefs could go here. Obviously, as the defending champs, definitely feels like corner or receiver, but like the way this draft fell, gosh, they got kind of smoked out all of the receivers and the corners. There's not one there for them. So tackle feels like a great pick. They can always revamp that offensive line in front of Mahomes. So makes a ton of sense. That wraps up the 1st round. We've got one more pick, top of round 2. Obviously going into that next day, we talked about this before. Does Carolina trade out so that someone comes up to get one of those quarterbacks, right? Do Penix or Bo Nix go here if they don't go in the 1st round? And I thought about it, but Carolina really needs to take a good player for Bryce Young and that offense. Once again, they also got kind of smoked and hosed out of some of the receivers that they might have thought would be there. A.D. Mitchell could be the one that you take, but, I don't know. Ronnie Bell, I don't know. Or not Ronnie Bell. The other Michigan receiver. Not Ronnie. Ronnie Bell's 2 years. Roman Wilson, thank you. Ronnie Bell was 2 years ago. Roman Wilson was this year. I was thinking Michigan receiver. So maybe Roman Wilson, I don't know. Right, so you get through all those options and you kind of look at what they have. Feels like tight end could be the pick, and I think Jatavion Sanders, really good player that a lot of people like out of Texas. Really good explosive plays. He plays well out of structure, has a large catch radius. You give Bryce Young a big target that's reliable to go with who you traded for in Deontay Johnson. And now Dave Canales has some real weapons that you can use to make Bryce Young successful in his 2nd year, because they really need to. They got to make this guy the guy in year 2. So do everything you can to help him out. They solidified the guard spots in free agency. They traded for a receiver. Feel like adding a tight end is a logical step here if they're not going to trade out and get more picks.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully Dave Canales can get Mingo going for that, because I thought highly of Mingo last year, and he just didn't really show up for the Panthers. But yeah, so getting a tight end, hopefully Mingo comes around. And now you got Deontay Johnson. So, I mean, yeah, that feels like a good fit. Tommy Tremble really hasn't done well since he's been in the NFL from Notre Dame. So, yeah, tight end, I could see it.
And so it's probably the toughest one in the draft, considering, it's day 2. You got to figure out who's left. And then it's like the Panthers need help everywhere.
Well, I messed around and thought maybe they could take an edge defender, try and replace Brian Burns as well. But the best one on the board is Chris Braswell, and it doesn't seem like he's one that people are this high on. Feels a little early for him, which you put all that together, and if there's not a guy the Panthers love, you could definitely see them trading back because they need help in so many places, so more picks might be better for them. And that's where you talk about a team trading up for that quarterback. All right, we want Bo Nix in pick 33, or Michael Penix, or even the man that Chase referred to affectionately as a trash can, Spencer Rattler, right? Could be one of those guys that someone's trading up for at 33 if the Panthers don't love a guy that they want to take at the top of round 2.
I think it would be smart because you're already picking at 39, Panthers, I believe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, heck yeah. Let's get some more picks and build a good team. I think it would be smart.
All right, fellas. That concludes the 2nd and 2 mock draft. Tom, appreciate you having you on again and you coming on and talking ball with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's my favorite time of year, so I appreciate you letting me throw some input out there. I spend so much time on it. It's ridiculous. But thank you for having me on. It was a good time. Thank you.
All right, everyone. That is our draft coverage right there. We'll be on the next time after the draft to talk about what actually happened. No more projections, no more film, no more who fits where. Now we're just analyzing who picked who, right? And that'll be the fun part coming after the draft. So the next time you'll hear from us will be post-draft coverage. And everybody enjoy the draft. It's a national holiday.
Yo, Ray, take us out, brother.
Ooh, yes, sir.